Welcome to the daily market wrap. This is the biggest charts in 30 minutes. And my name is David Zimmerman. I'm the founder of DeFi University and co founder of The Node. And we're going to go ahead and hop in. Let's take a look at BTC. Let's take a look at Bitcoin here. It's been a pretty eventful day, and we're seeing a nice bounce. Looks like we're just closing the daily session right now at 7. The daily session just ended here for BTC, I think, or might actually have another hour. Why would it have another hour? Well, regardless, BTC plus 4%, ETH plus 3%, Sol plus 5%. So seeing a little bit of a bounce today, really as a result of the S&P, which opened lower on Sunday and spent the entire session just bouncing today. So big bounce out of the S&P, big bounce out of the NASDAQ. The Russell put in one of the biggest bounces though, bouncing off of its 200-day moving average here. And not only did it bounce off of its 200-day moving average, but the Russell was down like over 4% overnight. So that was a big gap down, and then spent the entire session today just getting back to even, and actually got rejected at this trend line resistance. So starting to look a little bit more bearish here for equities. And I'm going to go ahead and remove these two drawn objects there. We've got this trend line. That's all you need right now on the Russell, is that little bit of trend line, but it's now resistance, getting rejected at resistance. Take a look at volatility. This is VX. Volatility actually looks to me as though it could continue on its merry way a little bit higher here. Now that we're trading well above 20, and we've been above 20 for a brief period of time, it looks like we could be about to see a decent correction this year. So it's been the last couple of weeks basically just trending up above 20. 20 is an important level, kind of like the barrier between complacency and increasing volatility regimes. So I think we're seeing an increasing volatility regime. The dollar starting to reverse course a little bit here. We take a look at bonds. Bonds a bid today. So bonds up, and we saw rates down a little bit. Notes were bid also. The very front of the curve bouncing off of 200-day moving average support. Yields reversing after getting rejected at 200-day moving average resistance. But the big thing today is crude. That's the big thing today, crude oil. And this was the big thing last week. And going into the weekend, what was going on in the Middle East was really driving the crude oil narrative. And here's the thing, that is a pretty big looking tail. So this is referred to as a tail. And it could be a topping tail. So if we just hop in here and take a look at this daily candle, we do have, this is a little bit of a doji, not quite a shooting star, not at all. We've got this tail below and this big long tail above. This is, to me, this signals indecision. But this type of tail up above, we could just see a regime where oil just drifts a little bit higher until that threat posed by Iran is completely eliminated. I would think that if you miss the short, if you miss the opportunity to get short up at 120, then you could absolutely, maybe wait for it to get back to 100 or so and open up a short position there. Crude oil, interesting to watch from the sidelines, but I'm not trading this one. I'm going to use this as a barometer for risk appetite. Speaking of a barometer for risk appetite, we've got to check in on the MOVE index. So this is a measure of bond market volatility. And today, it looks as though we did not see a real collapse in bond market vol. So, volatility tends to be mean reverting, but now that the MOVE index is up above its 200-day moving average, that spells bad news for stocks. And here's why. If we invert this scale, we take a look at bond volatility inverted with the S&P cash index thrown over top of it, which one is leading here? Is the S&P index leading, or is bond market volatility leading? I think bond market vol is the leading indicator. And we're seeing vol increase. Volatility is increasing. So that must mean that we're about to see a decent correction out of the S&P. And this is exactly what we saw the same time last year. We saw the same type of increasing volatility regime. So let's see how it plays out this year. But I would not be surprised to see the S&P cash index actually start to trade a little bit lower. So I'll be watching this 200-day moving average coming in at 65.83. That's really the important level on the downside now. As support, that 200-day moving average, let's take a look and see, instead of the 200, how about the 100? So that should act as some type of resistance. If the 100-day moving average acts as some resistance, then you'll know to expect a test of the 200 on the downside. And if that fails, then I think that this horizontal is decent support at 61.40 or so. And that would be a decent S&P type correction. It would not be some type of crazy 25-30% bear market. It would be a 12% correction. And if crude oil continues moving higher, I think that would be the catalyst to drive stocks a little bit lower here. So taking a look at VIX, now this is the calculation. VX is the futures contract. So VIX got all the way up to 35 today. That is, an elevated level of volatility. So I would expect this to mean revert. That's what volatility does. So we've got support back down in this channel. In fact, we can go ahead and delete that. We've got support down here at 20. But if we're going to see more volatility out of crude, I would expect that volatility won't get down to 20. Let's take a look at some of these Mag 7 items before we go ahead and switch gears back into crypto. So here's Tesla. And for Tesla, I just threw down this little interesting pattern. I'm going to remove that horizontal up there. We've got resistance above, this trend line resistance above. Tesla is basically trading at or just above its 200-day moving average right now. And we've got horizontal support below. So the moving average and the horizontal with the resistance above, it's very, very close to breaking out in either direction. My vote would be to the downside. So if Tesla were to break below 382, well, where would the next level of support come in? And I've got to think that it would be somewhere maybe like 275, something like that. So I could throw down some horizontal support there. That would be a long ways to go for Tesla. There might be a level of support a little bit higher. You could draw in something like this right there at the breakout. You see this breakout right here? You could use this as the next level of support. So I think it makes sense for Tesla. Google, Googl, big day to the upside today out of Google. But it's starting to print a series of lower highs and slightly lower lows. So here's the all-time high, here's a lower high, and so far this is a lower high. Here's a low, here's a lower low, here's a slightly lower low. So this is a downtrend forming. We're swinging down out of Googl. Now, if that were to be invalidated, you would know on a break above 320. So that level on the upside, if that were to be broken, then you would start thinking about fresh all-time highs for Googl. And now support for Google lies, down here at the 200-day moving average, which comes in right now at $253. Okay, NVIDIA. Really nice bounce on the 200-day moving average today for NVIDIA, NVDA. We've got this interesting little channel that it's been trading in for, basically the last several months. You can draw this in as you will. Something like this for that channel there that NVIDIA has been trading within for a while. Now, this is important support. And that 200-day moving average, if it were to hold, then you could say that it's, potential for NVIDIA to move back up to $200. Now, one thing that you've got to think about for NVIDIA is if these Mag 7, hyperscalers like Amazon and, Microsoft and, maybe Oracle and the rest of them, if they decide to curtail some of their capex or maybe just spend less, that could feed through eventually into NVIDIA's earnings. And the moment that Nvidia misses and doesn't raise, I think the stock will get sold hard. Maybe not in the first half of the year, but potentially in the second half of the year. Who knows? So this one, I would be very, very cautious. But this has been a very nice bounce at the 200-day moving average. And your expectation, or at least my expectation, would be that it would at least hold on to the 200-day. But here's the problem: see a little bit of a flag there. So you've got this move down and then the bounce to the upside a little bit at the 200-day moving average support. So that could be a bear flag in formation. We'll know if the 200-day moving average breaks. You would see confirmation down to 160. But Nvidia, a stalwart and a bellwether, one of the generals for the Nasdaq, if it starts to break the 200-day, that probably tells us that the Nasdaq might actually move a little bit lower. So Microsoft here really did a great job of holding some support. It came all the way down to, I drew in this trend line support here, held support, and currently bouncing a little bit, but well below the 200-day moving average. Put in these two big false breakouts. This is one of the big software players. So if Microsoft continues its bounce, you might expect Bitcoin to also continue its bounce. And the reason for that is, this software is pretty positively correlated with BTC right now. So if we take a look here, here's IGV. So IGV today, a nice bounce, didn't break down. That's that's on a volatile day as today. That's a great thing to see. So IGV bouncing, and now if we wanted to see what is the correlation between software and Bitcoin, this is what we could do. We could go ahead and throw over top of this just the S&P with a new price scale. Oh, wrong one, excuse me. Not the S&P. Want to throw down Bitcoin, not the S&P. Here we go. BTC. There it is. New price scale. And so look at that correlation. Pretty darn positive. And we're actually seeing software outperform Bitcoin during this bounce. So, maybe Bitcoin has a little bit more upside left in it. I guess time will tell. But I'm using software as potentially a leading indicator. So we'll see. Positive correlation so far. Here's Apple, just kind of treading water at 260. Amazon, big sell-off. We got this upsloping flag. You see this flag here? If I just draw this in, here's the pole. Here's that upsloping flag. If we actually get a sell-off, then this would confirm down here to 160. So Meta, we've got support in Meta, this trend line support, just a little bit lower at 630 or so. But so horizontal support would come in all the way down here at 480 on Meta. And Oracle, another software player, important AI software player. And with Oracle currently sitting just above trend line support, oh man, you really need to see the software just continue its bounce in order for this one to get back some of what has been lost. But if the bounce continues, then I think the expectation should be for Bitcoin to continue to bounce. So we'll see how this plays out. Here's BTC. My thesis is that this is a flag, and we are going to see the next leg down during this Bitcoin bear market over the next 6 or 8 weeks into the end of April. So my expectation here is that if we continue to bounce, that $74,500 acts as resistance, and eventually we roll back over and make a move down to 48,000. That is, the first real legitimate target on the downside this bear cycle for BTC, right there at 48K. Now that was an important level of resistance back in January 2024. I think that was right after the ETFs launched. There was, a big run up into the launch of the ETFs and then a sell off. And then when that level ended up breaking on the upside, that 49K level, when that ended up breaking, it became support. You can see the test of support in July of 2024, July or August of 2024. I think that was the first yen carry trade sell-off back then in August of 2024. Well, that was when 49K held as support. And if we get a retest, I would actually expect 49K to hold as support again. So 49K is a level where I will be opening some Bitcoin spot longs. So I think that makes sense as the first level on the downside this bear cycle to really start to actually buy a little bit. So that's my expectation there. But if we actually get a correction out of the S&P, out of stocks, at the same time that Bitcoin makes a move to 49K, well, then maybe 49K doesn't hold. Maybe we see Bitcoin move down to like the low 30s. That would be the next level of support for BTC. And so that is, basically from where Bitcoin's currently trading, we're talking about another 50% to the downside. And when we start to take a look at some of these altcoin charts, that actually makes sense to me. So if we're looking here at ETH, what is a potential target on the downside for ETH? Well, the lows from last bear cycle, and that would be 55% on the downside, about in line with what you could expect out of Bitcoin if we got true depression out of Bitcoin. But maybe we don't get true depression this bear cycle out of Bitcoin because we didn't get true euphoria on the upside. Here's Solana. My expectation for Solana is that it tests $30. So that would be, it's 60% on the downside for Solana. And this is a beautiful bear flag right here. This is a bear flag. So resistance at 95, support all the way down at 30 for Sol. Okie dokie. Let's take a look at some other alts. How about Sui? Big bounce today out of Sui. I think it was up at its peak, 12 or 13%, maybe actually a little bit more than that on the upside. So SUI put in a really, really nice bounce today, especially compared with its peers. It outperformed its peers. Let's see if it's able to hold on to any of these gains. Unless Bitcoin actually continues to rally, I would expect SUI to give back its gains like almost immediately. My target for SUI on the downside here is, right around 35, 36 cents, something like that. Because if we just zoom out a little bit here and take a look back in time, that was important support for SUI. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So this level at 30, what is that, 37, 36 cents, that was important support. I would start to buy some SUI about right there. But how far do we have until we get down there? What is that, another 60%? So yeah, long ways down for SUI. I'm short SUI. Here's XRP. XRP put in a pretty weak bounce today. I am short XRP. The level of support that comes in for XRP, we need to zoom out to the weekly to be able to see this a little bit more clearly here. So from the weekly, it becomes clear that that 200-week moving average is important support for XRP. You can see it right there. Comes in at around $1.12 or so. That's some important, just moving average support. So if or when that moving average support fails on the downside, then I would expect 77 cents to hold as the next level of support for XRP. Here's Arbitrum. And, ARB put in a pretty decent bounce today. Nothing to complain about for such a, useless token that does nothing, so decent sized bounce today. But my expectation here is we get ARB, a break below those recent lows at 8.7 cents. And I think ARB could, tumble and fall all the way down to like 2 or 3 cents. Something like that makes the most sense to me. I am short ARB. Here's AAVE, AAVE. Now, AAVE was unable to actually break back above this trend line resistance here. The other day, it got a little tiny false breakout, unable to really push above though. So, for me, I think the AAVE protocol is great, but you need a lot of AAVE tokens to be able to vote in governance and have it be meaningful. I think that you can stake AAVE and get some more attractive borrowing rates on stables and other tokens too. So there is some use for AAVE for the token, but without some type of a fee switch, I'm not quite sure. Like I really need to be able to earn some decent yield for holding it. And I think that $46 makes sense on the downside for AAVE. Those are the lows from last bear. So my expectation here is that all of these alts retest their lows from last bear. So that means another 55% on the downside for AAVE. That's my expectation there. I am short AAVE. BNB. BNB putting in a really nice looking flag here. Take a look at this flag. We've got the pole there, and there's the flag. If this were to complete, we'd see BNB down here at $200. I am short BNB, and my expectation is that if or when this little trend line support fails on the downside, it'll be a straight shot down, just like it was from the top of the channel to the bottom of the channel, just basically a couple of days on the downside there. So BNB, I remain short, and just like the other alts, my expectation is for it to test its bear market lows from last cycle. So that would come in, right around $200, $230 or so for BNB. Be interesting to see, where we're able to pick up some BNB. I would actually be a buyer down there at 200. Arrow, um, reward token, inflationary, and also it's just a scheme to be able to bootstrap TVL. So my expectation here for Arrow is that on a break below 27 cents, that it moves straight down to 13 cents. That is my expectation here for the Arrow token, simply because it moved straight up from 13 cents to above 27 cents during the bump. I expect it to break straight down. So very, very little trading volume down there at, from the 13-cent level to the 27-cent level. So I expect that since there's no trading volume, it'll act like a low volume node, on a volume profile chart. And you'll see it just get wicked down to there. So I am short Arrow. Here's Fartcoin. Fartcoin is, maybe a fun meme, but I bet this thing goes to zero this cycle, this bear cycle, or at least very, very close to zero. So I'm short Fartcoin, and I expect that if or when that 14-cent level breaks to the downside, I expect that Fartcoin will move all the way down here to 7 or 8 cents in a hurry. Like just a straight down type move quickly. So I'm short Fartcoin. And let's take a look at some higher quality alts. So here's Tau. This is, BitTensor Tau. I would love to be able to buy some BitTensor Tau, maybe down here somewhere, down at like $35 or $40. That would be a great deal to be able to pick it up there. Because if it just makes it back from, it's basically at the end of last bear, the beginning of the bull in 2023, mid 2023, that marks the lows for Tau. In fact, if I just drag this down a little bit, let me just mark those lows a little bit better, right down there at like $30. So that marks the low for Tau. Now, if we end up seeing Tau return to its all-time highs during the next bull, and you're able to pick some up for 30 or 40 bucks, man, that would be a nice trade there. Just basically, here's the trade: patiently wait for an opportunity to buy, maybe at around $50. Buy at $50, buy spot, no leverage, and then hold for 2 years, 3 years, something like that. And yeah, that's basically it. Wait, buy, hold. Super, super simple. Super, super simple idea. Here's Tron. The interesting thing to me about Tron is that this one has actually held on to its gains this cycle. And so this would be, one of the tokens that I would actually buy a bag of if it gets down to like 17 cents, simply because this has really outperformed just about everything else here. So Tron, really great to see, some digital asset tokens actually hold on to their bull market gains. This one was up 7x, and it's only given back a small percentage of the gains. So I'll be a buyer of Tron if it moves down to 17 cents. See, this level at 27 cents, that is the level of support. But if that were to fail, there really isn't much support down below until you get to 17 cents. And it's trading below its 200-day moving average now, which acted as resistance back at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. So that moving average was resistance, and that moving average is actually starting to roll over. So, this is a digital asset just like the rest. This will not be immune from Bitcoin really breaking down to or below its 200-week moving average. So my expectation is 17 cents for Tron. I would love to buy some down there. AVAX. This one, I'll be a buyer at $3 or so. I don't think AVAX, the protocol, is going to die. And so it's already broken down below its bear market lows from last bear cycle. Now, it did recover above those lows, but the fact that it's already broken down below those tells me that it's probably going to test its lows from 2020. So that's ugly. That's down there at $3 for AVAX. I would definitely be a buyer of AVAX spot down there at $3, however, and then just hold it back up to the highs from this last bull. That's a 20 bagger. Yeah, buy, wait, buy spot, hold, and do nothing. That's the strategy. ETHFI. I don't know that I would ever really buy this one. Trying to determine what the value proposition is here. I think that it could do really well if they're able to do something with the token. And this pattern doesn't actually look all that bad. For DeFi tokens like this is kind of the pattern that they like to put in. But if this were to break down below 24 cents, that would be really awful. Here's the thing. This is just another DeFi token. And so it's not immune from what Bitcoin does. That means, in my opinion, that if it breaks the lows that were put in on February 6th, then it probably goes, from where it's trading now, at least 60% to the downside, simply because that would be in line with all of the other alts, what I expect the other alts to do. So that tells me that, maybe down here to 20 cents, but really you could look at the flash crash lows down there at, 10 cents for ETHFI. Yeah. And I was holding ETHFI during the flash crash lows. Very happy I was able to get out. So let's see here. ETHFI. How about Doge? Doge. Now, getting very, very close to trend line resistance here. We've got the 200-day moving average well above at 16 cents, currently trading for 9 cents. So, the challenge for Doge is that nobody's actually built anything on top of that layer one, nothing substantial anyway. So my expectation would be that it would retest these bear market lows from last bear market down here at 5 cents or so. And so again, that is in line with all the rest of the alts. So that would be like 40% more on the downside or so. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Doge. I have no position in Doge. Here's SPX 6900. Yeah, so this one, I expect this one to go, if not to zero, then pretty close to zero, this bear market. No reason to hold this at all. I have no position in SPX. Okie dokie, let's see. With the last minute or two that we've got, I want to go ahead and just walk everyone through, just the school community and what you could expect if you join the free group here. So let's hop into the classroom. Now, in the classroom, I put together DeFi protocol deep dives on most of my favorite protocols in here. So this is pretty cool, but that's really not the true value of the classroom. The true value of the classroom is all of these courses that I put together. So the most important thing when you're getting into becoming a DeFi operator is learning how to control your mind and emotions. That is really, really difficult to manage. So you've got to start here with the investor mindset course. So this is 3 modules with 4 lessons and exercises in each module. And just go through this material. It's self-paced. There's video content for every lesson. There's audio podcast content at the bottom of each and every lesson that you can listen to. And of course, the lessons are formatted quite well with all of this infographic and image assets in here too. So all of the courses are formatted in the same way, whether it's beginner DeFi concepts, or it's the investor mindset course, or it's the concentrated liquidity provision course in here, which is totally free, or it's the perpetual futures course that I wrote in here, or maybe you want to learn about DeFi money markets like Aave. All of that is in here, and it's totally free. The school community is free to join, and the calendar. So every day I go live for 2 hours inside the school community, and I either teach content with a DeFi Don. That would be, I go through the university and he goes through the DeFi high school. So we do that for 1 hour each day. But I also go live and cover more advanced topics. So today was the market review and week ahead. And again, this is all. This here is paid. So the only content that's paid in the school community is if you want to join a live session every single day for 2 hours. We've got 2-hour-long sessions each day. And if you want to be able to join and learn and ask questions and go through the stuff that I go through each day, then you can definitely do that. But everything else is free. So all of the educational content in here is totally free. And all of the posts all of the very valuable posts that I put out here every day, this is free too. So if you want to learn, let's say you want to learn about how to use OpenClaw, well, I went through this live with everyone today and built an OpenClaw instance, and did it using Cursor, built it out in Docker, and hey, this is a lot of fun for me to be able to share. I did this live with everyone in the school community today. So it's not just about learning a DeFi and crypto skill set. It's also about applying AI within that skill set. So yeah, this is the place to be, and it's totally free to join. So I would appreciate it if you get some value from what we do over here. Just join the free group. And thank you everyone for joining live. I always appreciate you guys. And yes, Ellie, the textbooks are on Amazon. And if I can actually share that real quick, we can hop on over here to Amazon. And let me just see if I can search for it. I'm gonna go DeFi University, and then I'll switch the tab over. So if you want to buy the books, so that you have like a physical version of the course material, they're available over here on Amazon. Perpetual futures trading, DeFi money markets, beginner DeFi concepts, liquidity provision, concentrated liquidity provision and full range liquidity provision, and of course, investor mindset. This is the most important one right here. You got to get the mindset down first. So, yep, those are the books that I wrote and published on Amazon, and go ahead and check them out. And if you get some value from them, just make sure to report back. I'd love to hear about it. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining live, and I will see you all tomorrow. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the live stream at the end of the night is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, the live stream is at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So mark your schedule. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great one.